Hi everybody. I thought it might be helpful if I provided some more media project tips because just based on some questions I've been receiving, and now that you have some idea about what you're going to be writing about, the project ideas that I've received from you thus far look really good for the most part, and you will be receiving, if you haven't already, you will be receiving responses from me in the next couple of days. So watch for that as well. So regarding what you're writing about, you want to think about whether you're appealing to emotion or logic. You want to avoid appealing to emotion because it's not convincing in an argument. So writing something like, it's really sad that this happens, or this is a big problem, kind of makes your reader feel like that, right? Instead of appealing to emotion, which is not very convincing, you want to appeal to logic by saying things like, the effect of this representation causes, and then talking about what it causes. So we assume that you've already explained what your text is and what it looks like and what's going on, and then talking about the cause, the outcomes of that, or what it leads to, or what effects it has. And that makes your reader feel like this. So you want to aim for a logical argument rather than an emotional one. Okay, next you want to look for what your text isn't saying, or at least isn't saying very loud. And most of you will be able to find something like this in at least a couple of the things that you're looking at. You can think about, and you don't have to, but these are just some ideas. You can think about comedy regarding how do the things that are funny let us know what is acceptable, and also invisibility regarding how do the things that are invisible, or the things that we don't see, let us know who is valued. So if you look at this list on the right here, I have binaries. I have fat versus skinny, gay versus straight, disabled versus unimpaired, black versus white, right? These are binaries that we've been talking about and reading about all semester. And if you think about it in terms of comedy, what characters are more likely to be portrayed as funny or humorous in television, in advertising, or in movies? It's more likely to be this side of the binary. And what that does is it tells us that by being able to mock this character, or being a mockable character, being a humorous character, being a silly character, lets us know that the opposite is the thing that we want to strive for. So the funny poor person lets us know that our goal is to be rich. And I'm not saying that these things are never shown as funny, but it's unlikely that you're ever going to see a character whose whiteness is the funny thing about them, unless it's juxtaposed against their being surrounded by only black people. So usually the thing that is funny is going to be the thing that is marginalized, or the identity trait that is marginalized, so that we know what's normal. And I'm talking generalizations, of course. And then as far as invisibility goes, the identity traits that we're more likely to see on television or in toys and representations are going to be the things on this side versus the things on this side, unless that representation is visibly represented as, right, comedic. So it kind of comes full circle. So you want to think about how these things are represented. And if they're not represented as comedic, are they being represented in sort of an essentialized way, like the poor person being represented only because they're poor, or the woman being represented only because she's doing womanly things. So when someone in this category is represented on television, is a fat person in the television show because of their fatness, and is that a core part of their character, or are they just in the show, and is their fatness not a core part of their character? So you want to think about that, because when the fatness is the core part of a fat person's character in a show, that reinforces the idea that fat is something that we have to focus on, versus a skinny person's character, their skinniness would very rarely be something that we would focus on when we see a skinny character, right? Because skinny is just normal. Okay, so a sample of analysis that I'm going to provide for you is one of this toy and television show called Handy Manny. He's a cartoon. He's targeted towards 3 to 5 year olds, and he's made by Disney. He is a construction worker and laborer, and he speaks both English and Spanish. So the representation is one of a Latino male. So what you want to do, and this is based on your rubric outline, so you can look at the rubric as we're going through this if you want. Number 1 is for your intro, or for your arguments. You want to construct an argument. And the argument for this Handy Manny toy is that on the one end, while Handy Manny looks like or is a cartoon that appears to provide a positive representation of Latino masculinity, and then I switched to another color so that you can think about this, the toy actually reinforces marginalizing constructions of Latinos as illegals. And then I would expect that your argument would talk about how in one way it looks like a positive representation, like, oh, isn't it good that we have a toy of a Latino male, but what is the negative part of this? Why is he a construction worker? Because we only think of Latinos as people who do blue-collar labor. And what does that do for our thought, for continuing to think about Latinos as marginalized? Okay, so your intersections and your keywords, this is number 2 in the rubric. What is intersecting? What parts of the class terms that we're talking about are intersecting? You want to think about issues of race and gender and class when you think about this. And in this analysis that I'm providing for you, it deals with race, gender, and class. You don't have to deal with all 3, but you want to aim to deal with at least 2 in each of your analyses, as it talks about in your rubric. But you could talk about women and race, or gender and class, as you go through analyzing. And you can talk about the invisibility of race, or the invisibility of class, or the visibility, or however you want to do it. And intersectionality doesn't have to be in every single one of your analyses. If you're having a lot of trouble, you can contact me, but you really do want to try to integrate this. And then the keywords that are used in this analysis are marginalization, masculinity, construction, and representation. Finally, how does this link to oppression? This is number 3 in the rubric. So what is the bigger deal about this toy? Yeah, it's just a toy. What's the big deal? Okay, so I want to think about the broader implications. So I could talk about how immigration policies in the U.S. are anti-Mexican, and present Mexicans and Latinas as aliens. And I could also talk about class status assumptions about all people who appear to be Latino, Latina, as aliens, and how this really reinforces that idea that they're all the same. So it's an essentializing toy. So that would be a good way of talking about the toy in a broader context of culture. In 4, we talk about course materials, and this is a question I've gotten from several of you. Okay, so you want to use quotes just like you've been using throughout the semester to support your argument. So you'd want to, I would suggest at least, 2 quotes from 2 readings from the textbook to support each analysis. That can be your aim, your goal. So I would go and I would find which of my texts would support this topic, and then what is an outside source and why can't you use them. So these quotes here, the ones you're going to use to support your argument, from the textbook we've been using, or maybe one of the articles or something, and if you need me to make something available, let me know. But what is an outside source? An outside source would be like internet research. You don't want to use internet research because the point of you using these readings is for you to show me that you can apply the material we've been going through all semester. So, you know, use class material. Hooray! Okay, finally, the length. I apologize for the typo. Since I'm human, I am not perfect. I admit it. But your length here for each analysis is going to be 400 to 425 words, and that's times 3 because you're doing 3 analyses. So I hope you are having a good time with this project. I know it's just a project and you're all frowning because I said good time, but I hope you are having fun applying this to your world and to the things around you, and that it's helping you to see things a little bit differently. Contact me if you have any questions, and thank you from me and Man.